Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 81 of the Stark Reflections podcast, Becoming Unskippable with Jim Kukral. Jim Kukral is recognized as an expert in online marketing and branding. He delivers insightful and entertaining keynotes to growth-oriented organizations on attention-getting marketing, creative branding, and understanding how customers think, react, and most importantly, buy. With a passion for speaking and teaching, Jim travels the world to teach brands and business owners how they can apply his unskippable method to their marketing and brand mission to generate positive ROI-based outcomes and purposely attract lifetime customers. Now, you might recognize Jim as the co-host of the Sell More Books Show podcast. He also appeared in episode 74 of this podcast, Perspectives on the Past, Present, and Future of Publishing, in a panel that was recorded at Rock Apocalypse in Cleveland in early May of this year with Jim, Jay Thorne, TJ Piperbrook, Zach Bohannon, and I. Jim and I, of course, talk about his new book, Your Journey to Becoming Unskippable in Your Business, Life, and Career. And stay tuned at the very end of the interview, as well as in the post-interview spot, to learn how you can have a chance for you to download a digital copy of Unskippable completely for free, as well as a chance to win a signed copy of the print book from Jim. But first, I wanted to share a comment left from episode 78. Pranathi said, "Great solo episode. What I love about the indie world is hearing the respectful, differing views of experienced people within the industry. I agree with you on the concept of collaboration when it makes sense for the book. Beauty of indie is the flexibility." And I couldn't agree more. Yes, the beauty of indie is indeed the flexibility. And I love the fact that we have so many choices, so many options, and there's no one path. So thank you, Pranathi, for that comment on episode 78. Now, this podcast has been downloaded in 83 different countries since it launched in early 2018, and I'm still getting new people joining in and going back and listening to the very first episodes that started the first week of January 2018. In fact, so far, there's only about 5 of the 80 episodes that didn't get a download in the past week. So, a hearty welcome to new listeners, to those joining this episode as their introduction, as well as to those who might be playing catch-up from all that backlist episodes and are potentially binge listening to those. And of course, a special, "Hey, how you been?" to regular listeners. Thanks so much for coming back each week. If you have a comment to share on any of the backlist episodes, go ahead and leave it. I'm happy to share them here, and it doesn't matter if it was just from last week's episode or something that caught your fancy that goes back to 2018. They're all there for your benefit. They're all there to spark insight and discussion and, of course, reflections. In terms of a personal update, this is the third time I'm trying to record this particular segment because all of the retired people in my neighborhood are deciding to mow the lawn in the middle of the week. It's actually wonderful for those who like to sleep in on the weekends instead of hearing those lawnmowers, but it's challenging for somebody like me who works from home to make that time. In any case, for the personal update, apart from lawnmowers in the background, I'm about 12,000 words into a short story that I'm writing for an anthology. This is an anthology-themed monster road trip, and it was a request from the editors, and I've been in their previous anthology. And this is a Michael Andrews story. So Michael Andrews is the main character from my Canadian Werewolf series. It's not yet a series because I don't follow my own advice. I have the first book out, Canadian Werewolf in New York, which came out in Gulp 2016. After taking 10 years to actually finish the book. I'd started it in 2006. So there you go. Again, not following advice and getting projects done. And there is a short story this time around. It was a 10,000 word short story that turned into the novel. So I still have the short story as a sort of a standalone. And then if people like that, they get the full novel that kind of continues the adventures from that single day in Michael's life. Now, this particular short story, which is called Stowaway, takes place a little bit after the adventures from a Canadian werewolf in New York, which was set in 2014. So I have this story set in the summer of 2015, where Michael ends up having to go on a road trip up to near Stowe, Vermont, for his friend Gail. And as often happens to Michael, he encounters somebody who needs his assistance, a young girl who is on the run from an abuser. And so I've described the story as Logan meets planes, trains, and automobiles, because the Michael Andrews stories tends to have a little bit of wry humor in it, so there's some of the fun. And of course, there's the trains, planes, and automobiles road trip aspect of moving from train to different modes of transportation to get from New York up to Stowe. And of course, the sort of the father-daughter style relationship between Michael and Bridget, the young woman who he ends up traveling with because they need to help each other out. So I'm having so much fun with the story. I was actually having trouble with it because the logistics, I had to go back to 2015. I had to look at what the weather was. And in particular, that actually informed one of my scenes early in the story, because as a werewolf, he has to keep his clothes hidden in different parts of the park. And of course, even when I was at New York recently in Central Park, I was just verifying where I had actually had him store these clothes. But because it had rained, the clothes were wet, and that causes complications. But then I also had to figure out when was sunrise, when was sunset on this particular day in 2015, because that's really critical to the timeline of the story, because, the sunset is 8:17, for example, and the train gets in at 7:50. So if there's any delays, he's going to be on the train when the sunset comes, and he's going to turn into a wolf. So there's complications like that, but then there's also the logistics of where they are on the stops along the way and what time of the day it is, because it's kind of a countdown story in terms of the tension. And I ended up early on getting so bogged down in the logistics and the Amtrak train and what were the cars like and what were they for. I mean, even reached out to a good friend, Jay Thorne, who does the authors on the train, of course. You may remember him and Zach from an earlier episode of this podcast. And asked him, are there payphones on Amtrak trains? Because I've never noticed one, and I couldn't find that online. And of course, Jay confirmed that they weren't, which was helpful, because I need to ensure that they don't have an easy way to communicate while they're trapped on the train. One of the elements, for example, from horror fiction is when you have somebody in a situation and you wonder, well, why wouldn't they just use their cell phone to call for help or whatever, or why wouldn't they just check that out online? So I have to have a situation where they do not have cell phones with them, and there is no way for them to easily reach out to Bridget's mother, who they're on their way to see. So I ended up, I guess the point of the story, I guess the point of this little diversion is that early on I was getting so bogged down in the logistics and making it realistic, and I was losing the fun of writing the story, of writing a tale about Michael. And when I just got into it, and it was really, really hard for me to get to the point where Bridget and Michael meet. And once I got to that point in the story, I just got to put these two characters on stage, and I got to watch them interact with one another. And elements of their characters came and grew out of that. Elements of the relationship and the bonding that they establish grew out of the dialogue. I didn't even know what they were going to say to one another until they said it. It was almost like I was a witness, and I love it when this happens in writing, is I'm sitting back and I'm just watching these two characters like they're doing an improv, and they come up with this great dialogue, and I'm just recording what I see them saying. Does that happen to you as a writer? I mean, some of the things that I write are pre-scripted or understood what's going to happen and who's going to say what. But all I do is I think about the motivation of each of the characters, and then I set them in action and I watch them go and I record it. And magic happens, because at the end of that writing session, I have something that I wasn't anticipating, and that is a really, really fun experience. So that's a bit of a longer personal update. The only other thing I wanted to share here, which is important, is that on Thursday, June 27th, Kevin Tumlinson, Dan Wood, and I, as three representatives of Draft to Digital, are going to be hosting an Ask Us Anything hour-long live video chat. If you are a Draft Digital author, you would have received a check for your email received within the last few days, the week of June 17th, for a note about that where you can kind of register to be notified when it goes live. Or if you're not a Draft Digital author and you're just looking for information about self-publishing in general and digital, and obviously people can ask very specific questions about Draft Digital because you have me and two far smarter people, Kevin and Dan, to answer those questions. So if you're not a Draft Digital author, you can still go check out when it's going to be at on Facebook. Check for the Draft to Digital page because that's where the live video is going to be posted, and it will of course be recorded so that you can enjoy it at a later date if you're not able to get there. It will be, I believe, scheduled for 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm really looking forward to that because I love that sort of interaction where we can help answer questions for people. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But that's it for personal updates and updates like that. Let's move on quickly to a word about this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices, and right after that, we'll get into the interview with Jim. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices is a way for indie authors to get their works out into the universe. Whether you have pre-crafted your audio files and they're professionally done and ready to go, you can use Findaway Voices for distribution to the world's broadest global network of library and retail markets for audiobooks, or if you're looking for a professional narrator, you can use Findaway Voices to find them. In June of 2019, as I'm recording this, I just logged on to Findaway Voices and I looked at, I've earned revenue from Findaway Voices on my thriller Evasion via Bountiful in both the US and Canada. Now again, Bountiful is a market I'm not even familiar with, but hey, if I can earn money and find new readers on new platforms that are beyond the big ones like Amazon, Apple, Google? Like Amazon, Apple, Google, and Kobo, count me in. It's adding more of these additional markets to my overall income that help me to diversify my earnings as a writer. So if you're interested in audiobooks and interested in diversifying your income in audiobooks and self-publishing, you should check them out over at starkreflections.ca/findaway. But that's enough introductory matter. Let's get on to this fascinating conversation with Jim Kukral. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh, it's great to be here with Mr. LaFave, one of my favorite people in the world of all of self-publishing.
It has been a while since we hung out together, right? At least a month.
Yeah, I know. It's always great to see you. We have so much fun when we see each other, even when you go to the wrong restaurant.
That's right. Even when I make it to the wrong restaurant. So I am so excited. I'm almost done your journey to becoming unskippable. And I've been looking so forward to this book. So many questions to ask, but let me start with one of the primary things that really stuck out when I first started reading the book was you spent quite a bit of time setting up the talk about priorities. Money versus doing what you love to do, family is priority rather than wealth. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you started the book that way?
Yeah, it's an inspirational business book, which is like a cross genre.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this book really came at a time in my life when I had to do a lot of retrospective thinking based upon a story I tell in the book about being in political office here in the United States and, reaching my late 40s and being an entrepreneur for 20 years. I really just kind of got to a point where I was like, these are things I need to say, and they were relatable and authentic to me. And so Unskippable is really a mindset book in a lot of ways about where my head is at this current point in time. I mean, I talk in there about, I'm so tired of how we idolize people who start billion-dollar startups. It's like they're not gods; they're just people who started a business. They didn't answer. Why do we follow this wealth path that everybody has in their head? Like, you're not successful unless you started Uber. It's like I have no idea who the guy's name who started Uber, but I know the guy's name who smiled at me at the mall the other day, or the person who was real nice to me. So there's a lot of mindset stuff in the book, and a lot of business lessons as well.
Okay, let's go back to the politics because you also spend some time sharing that very deeply personal and very, I mean, you leave yourself exposed in a very vulnerable way. When you talk about you put your business aside because you wanted to make the community better, you got involved in politics, and it almost ruined your business. It almost ruined your family. It almost ruined your self-esteem. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do tell that story in the book, and without giving it all away, because I want you to read the book and get the whole. The basic is I decided to serve my community, and I ran for a city council position in the little suburb of Cleveland that I live in. And I ran for two reasons. I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi. And then I ran for the narcissistic reason, which was, boy, I've been doing marketing for 20 years. Like, I can market the heck out of myself and my personal brand, and I can win. And long story short, I did win. But then what I found out was that politics isn't for me after everything that myself and my family went through. When you are a person who wants to try and do good things and you get into an industry, or in this case politics, and you find that those people are not rewarded for doing good things, they are actually, it's the exact opposite. The more good you try to do, the more people try to bring you down. And that is just like you said, it almost destroyed my business, my finances, my marriage, my relationship with my children, and the community name that I had. And it almost completely crushed me.
Wow. And you leave that on the table in a way to just be completely transparent and honest with your audience. The other thing that you do that's really transparent and something I appreciate about the book is, I mean, I've listened to you speak, I've seen you on stage, I listened to your podcast, um, and you mentioned that you write like you speak, and that is so true. As I'm reading the book on my Kobo, I am feeling like you're sitting across the table from me in a coffee shop, just sharing these really cool stories. So, how have you always written that way?
Yeah, that's the only way I know how to write, which is why I'm so terrible at fiction, right? I tried to write fiction, and I'm good at writing dialogue, but I'm not good at writing stories in fiction world. So yeah, that's the number one comment I get from all of my books, which is I felt like I was sitting at a coffee shop having a conversation with you. And that's a huge flattering thing to say to me, because that's how I am. I like, you and I have sat and talked many times in person, and my books are exactly my voice. And I don't try to change that, because you have to be authentic to your writing style. And like 99% of people love it, but then there's always somebody who comes in and it's like, oh, it's not the typical nonfiction book because it's not, written in prose the proper way and everything. My books are big conversations, so I'm glad you say that. I'm proud.
Oh, you should be. It is something. It's something that comes through very, very effectively. So let's go back to Unskippable because I know, and it's obvious because even in the content of the book that this is a pathway for you for speaking engagements. For example, that the important thing is connecting with people and helping them better their business. You also you're not focusing on authors, you're focusing on pretty much anyone with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to make their business better, make their personal life better. It's quite a broad topic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to write a straight up marketing book. I've written those books before. I've written books for entrepreneurs. I've written books for small business owners. And this is kind of goes across to anybody who wants to have a better life, a business, or a career. And there's a lot of business lessons in it. But yeah, I definitely wanted to make it so that anyone could pick it up. Which in some ways you worry, Mark, because you don't want to make, like, I should have just written a straight up marketing book if I wanted to just dominate that genre, or I should have written a straight up inspirational book if I wanted to be like that. This is kind of a cross genre, so I don't know if that's going to be a mistake for me or not, because are people who thinking it's going to be an inspirational book and then it's got a lot of business stuff in it, are they going to be disappointed, or vice
Right.
versa? But I had to write what was authentic to me, right? Like I
Okay.
could write what other people told me I should write, even though that breaks the whole, right to market strategy. But the way I could get the book out of my head.
Right, right. And this seems to be, I mean, Unskippable almost seems to be a wonderful brand for you because it's a great book. It's a possibility for people to hear you talk about this, and you can probably custom gear your talk to a specific audience. So, for example, at the Career Author Summit next year in Nashville, you can probably talk about things from the book specifically associated with writers and writing, but maybe you go to a business conference in Chicago and you're going to give a completely different viewpoint for, I don't know, like business owners or something like that.
So I think maybe the authors, the nonfiction authors in listening to this might find my strategy interesting. So
Okay.
I actually went and when I came up with the term unskippable, the first thing I did was go look and see who's using it. And then I looked for who trademarked it, and nobody had. So I actually own the trademark on the word unskippable in a marketing and advertising publishing sense. And my plan was to write this first book. And my overall plan is to write many more books. So at the end of this book, I actually have a call to action where I say, do you want to write an unskippable book with me? And I'm modeling it around, the Hell Elrod, Honore Quarter, Miracle Morning. You have
Ah,
morning, and then you have the Miracle Morning for writers, the Miracle Morning for couples. So my long-term plan is to build the unskippable brands, unskippable for real estate agents, unskippable for goat herders. And now that I own the trademark on that term, that's the long-term entrepreneurial business plan. So I would say if you want to follow that methodology, if you're writing a nonfiction book, that's how I did it. Now, whether or not I'm going to write 20 more books, I certainly plan to. That is the actual plan at this moment, but the book just came out, so I'm just getting started.
I'm suddenly having this chicken soup for the unskippable soul moment right here.
Well, that's a kid. Did you put a TM on when you said that? Because
Yes, I did. On both of them, on both chicken soup and on Unskippable, because I know they're both trademarked. um, One of the things I really loved about the book, I mean, there's so many things to love about it, is you share so many different success stories from different businesses. And I think, I mean, even though you're giving lots of great content in this interview, I think it's important for people to actually read them. But I mean, one of the things is you pull information and anecdotes from, I mean, there are books that I've read that I recognize and go, oh yeah, that's cool, that's great that he's using that because it's perfect for this moment. And then there's other ones where I go, oh no, now there's another book I got to read, thanks Jim. Which is great because I have this list of things I need to read now, and podcasts I need to listen to because of because of the book. But one of the things, you talked about the popsicle story, which came from, I think, the Heath and Heath book, Power of Moments.
yeah, so basically in their book, The Power of Moments, they talk about a story of a little like hotel in, I think it's in Beverly Hills actually, and they talk about how these powerful moments get people to remember this hotel. And basically, there's a little like phone or something down by the pool. I think it's a button or a phone, and you pick it up and you like order a popsicle, and like someone from the staff will like come out and bring you a popsicle, right? And the concept is the power of moments. Like, so you're at this little tiny hotel that's 2 blocks down from the Beverly Hills Hilton or whatever, and like, how does that business stand out? How are they remembered? And certainly when somebody is sitting by the pool and they find out about that, what's the first thing they do? They put a great review on for the company, for the hotel. They go on Facebook or create an Instagram video of them ordering a popsicle, right? Those are the like little things you can do. And I talk about Jay Baer's book, Talk Triggers. That's like a talk trigger. Like, that's one of the things that gets people talking about your business. And it's such a silly, small thing. I worked for a print company when I was in college, and the guy used to put a little handful of Jolly Ranchers in every pack of business cards or flyers or anything you ordered. I ran into somebody 25 years later, and we were reminiscing about the guy who owned the business named Vern. And the guy I'm talking to goes, you know what I remember most about Vern? It was those Jolly Ranchers he put in every pack. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. He goes, oh yeah, I love those Jolly Ranchers. Every time I ordered, I'd look forward to getting those 3 little half-cent Jolly Ranchers in the pack. And that is a memorable experience. And
Wow.
that is how you build an unskippable brand, by little tiny things like that.
And you talk about that, like those moments, those things that you can do that are unique, that aren't about cheapest, fastest, quickest, or any of those other elements. It may be more expensive, but there's something special and unique about it.
Yeah, well, look, traditional benefit-based marketing tactics, free shipping, coupons, quick delivery, like those are all really powerful marketing tactics. But the thing is now in today's skippable world, people just expect those now, right? It's not like those are differentiators any longer. There are reasons that set you apart and make you unskippable beyond those marketing tactics. And that's really what the whole book's about is how do you think a little bit differently so you can take yourself to the next level and start to generate. Sorry, I got some notification showing up there. Uh, my apologies. How do you take yourself to the next level and get somebody to pay attention to you and then talk about you and remember you, right? People want to have a joyful experience when they do business with anybody. And if you're not creating epiphany moments, if you're not creating joyful experiences with people, like a great example, you get somebody to sign up for your online course or something, and then the second that they sign up they get an email from you, and in the email it's like, all right, now fill out this 25-page form. Like, that's not a joyful experience.
Right.
The first thing they're going to do is go, oh my god, this is work, I don't want to do this. What's a better way of doing that? Actually getting on the phone and talking to them and onboarding them and walking them through. So all these little epiphany moments and joyful experiences are really the difference between being skippable and unskippable in today's world.
That's really cool. Now you talk about the alter ego effect, and you mention somebody called Johnny Showtime. Who is this Johnny Showtime?
So yeah, there's this great book out called The Alter Ego Effect by is it Todd Herman? Yeah, that's right. And I read this great book, and and basically his concept is this. I'll boil it down to this: if you put on a cape, you become a different person, like Superman, right? So when I go to speak or when I do consulting or even when I'm doing a show like this, I'm a pretty normal, laid back guy, but I will put on the cape and I will go to the next level before I walk on the stage or before I go meet with the meeting planners. And, I'm being a performer. And I made up this really crazy name. It's called Johnny Showtime. It's so ridiculous and lame. But to me, like, that's the guy that I become when I need to be on. And when I'm doing a podcast or going on stage, I put that hat on. I don't literally have a hat, but I become that person, and then I perform at a different level. Beyonce is not the same person she is when she's on The Late Show or on stage when she is at home with Jay-Z, right? I mean, everybody has that different level, and Todd's book argues that in full. It's a great book, and I kind of just briefly touch on it in the book, but it's very powerful psychological trigger for a lot of people. It is for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then the other thing that you share as advice, and this maybe goes back to even your experience in politics, is just how divisive this world is, and talking about as that brand, as that persona, actually standing for something without worrying that you're going to alienate half of the audience.
Yeah, well, there's a report out by Edelman that came out last year called Earned Brand. And basically, they make this big argument about what are called belief-driven buyers. And 64% of consumers now consider themselves belief-driven buyers. And a belief-driven buyer is somebody who believes that they are going to do business with and consume from a brand that shares their core beliefs. So people no longer trust politicians or governments to make change in the world any longer. They're turning to brands. So 64% of people now are choosing to do business or not do business with somebody who shares their core belief structure. So I go into the whole part 2 of this book is all about those belief-driven buyers. And I make an argument, I talk about the Nike situation with Colin Kaepernick. I talk about Yeti coolers and the big good story about them. And, people get scared when I say this because they're like, oh, dude, that means I need to be political or I need to, no, you don't have to be political, but you got to stand for something in today's world because people care that you care now. And what I like to tell people is, would you rather have 1% of the entire market or 100% of half of it? Because when you become somebody who shares your beliefs to your tribe, then all of a sudden they will consume your products, services, whatever, voraciously, because they now share a belief with you. So I go into a lot of depth about that. And it's scary for a lot of people because they think it just has to be about politics or religion or something, which it can, and it does work. But it's really about sharing a belief with people. And once you get in there and once those people really believe that you care, boy, man, they just will continue to buy from you over and over and over again.
That is fantastic. Well, Jim, thank you so much for spending the time to answer some of my questions, to chat with me today. I'm so excited about this book. I've made pages of notes on things that I can do to improve my own brand and business and experience as an author and as a business professional. And I'm so excited because just prior to the interview, I was talking about wanting to buy a copy for somebody who leaves a comment on this show at starkreflections.ca. And you said you would sign a copy and ship it off to them. I really appreciate that.
Mark, I would do anything for you. If you would ask for 100, I would have given you 100 because you're so kind to me over the years and you've been very helpful. And it's wonderful to have a person of your character and your assistance and guidance in this world and friendship. So anything you need to do, I will do for you, Mark.
Well, that is awesome. I'm not going to take too much advantage of that, but I will say that after the interview, I'll explain details on how people can win a signed copy of Jim's awesome new book, Unskippable. Jim, please let my listeners know where they can find out more about you, about your speaking, about your other books as well.
Yeah, actually, if you just go to beunskippable.com, beunskippable.com, that'll take you right to my website. And actually, if there are people who would like to read a copy of Unskippable, I would be happy to give out a copy to your listeners in exchange for an honest review. So if you have people who are interested in that, Mark, they can contact you. I'll hook them up with you, and I'll give away copies because I just want more people to read the book. Again, I didn't write this book to make a ton of money selling books. I wrote this book to get it out into the world and to get speaking gigs and things like that. So I want people to read it.
Oh, that's cool. And I know people will benefit from it. Thank you so much for that very generous offer, Jim. I'll explain after the interview how people can get a hold of those things, as well as potentially win a signed copy. So thanks, Jim. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, that was a great interview with Jim. So much from that interview, so much from the book. But let's get to the giveaway. First, everyone who listens to the show is welcome to a free digital copy of Your Journey to Becoming Unskippable in Your Business, Life, and Career by Jim Kukral. There'll be a link on the show notes for episode 81 over at starkreflections.ca. Simply click on that link to access the free copy. All that Jim asks is that you consider leaving an honest review of the book. But there'll be an additional giveaway for anyone who leaves a comment on this episode. A suggestion for comments might be, what's one point that you took away from this interview that you'd want to highlight or reflect on? Or perhaps, what's one unique thing about you and your writing that might help you towards establishing yourself as unskippable in today's skippable world? And you can leave the comment over at starkreflections.ca for episode 81. Everyone who comments will be put into a random selection for a signed copy of the book that Jim will send directly to you. But wait, there's more. I want to support this book. I want to support Jim, and I want to support my awesome listeners. So I'm offering an additional copy that I'm going to purchase for anyone who comments. And also, I'm going to be offering an additional copy on top of that for just my wonderful podcast patrons who will be entered into that draw automatically. That's my way of saying thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for your patronage. If you're interested in supporting the show and gaining access to additional material and the occasional surprise like that, you can check it out over at patreon.com/starkreflections. The contest deadline for leaving a comment will end on July 10th, so I can announce it in that week's Friday episode of the show. So if you're binge listening to this to backlist episodes of the podcast and it's after July 10th, 2019, then my apologies on you missing the chance, but I'm sure there'll be other giveaways on other future podcasts because I'm always encountering great content that I think will be valuable to this listening audience. Now, one of the many things that this interview and reading Jim's new book made me reflect on was that he was talking about standing for something and brands actually taking a stance, a solid, non-wishy-washy stance that focuses on beliefs and core values. Now, this is so in line with an author when they look at their book and they focus in on a very specific target audience. Trying to appeal to everyone leads to pleasing just a small percentage of a larger market, or honing in and focusing in on a very specific subset, giving them the goods to the ideal audience and not worrying about those outside your audience, resulting in giving them something that they'll truly value and truly cherish. It's the age-old, your book is not for everyone, so stop trying to do that with it. It's for a very specific type of reader. Your book answers a very specific concern or need in a specific type of reader. If it's nonfiction, it's usually obvious what that answers for them. If it's fiction, it's a little less obvious because it might just be that they want to escape into the world, or they want to be entertained, or they want to explore new worlds or new theories through your writing. But that is usually related to the type of book they like to read. Jim spoke about his writing style probably not being for everyone, that he wrote it in a very conversational style, and he recognizes that, and he's willing to take the chance and put that out there. It's the same sort of thing for you. Don't worry about the masses. Worry about the specifics of what the ideal reader wants and how your book, that specific book that you're looking at that particular moment, meets the needs of that ideal reader. And make sure you're delivering it to them, forsaking grand visions of pleasing everyone. You can't please everyone, and trying to do so is the quicker way to failure than focusing in on a tighter demographic and giving them exactly what you know they want, what they need, what they can benefit from. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks to Jim Kukral for the generosity in offering a signed copy that he's going to ship to the winner, as well as digital copies for everyone. Gee, wasn't that a little like having Oprah Winfrey on the show? You have a free book of Unskippable, and you get one, and you, and you, and you. And thanks to you, the listener, for being with me in episode 81. If you like this podcast, feel free to share it with someone that you think would benefit from it. And so, until next week, and episode 72, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.